Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon. Did we get the name tags right this time? Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
Excellent. So it's been a while since you last saw us. Oh, Paul forgot to turn his phone down again. So it's been a while since we saw you last. Let me just press the right button. There we go.
No. Next one.
Next one. There we go.
We're in a bit of an improv studio today.
Yeah. If you could see what we could see, we've got a panel-like gaffer taped effectively to the ceiling because this one was a little bit overbearing, as you can see. But it's been a while since we last saw you. We've been in somewhat of a internet blackout, which is, I guess, not surprising for a national park, but it was worse than you experienced it last time.
Well, so we'll come on to, we met up with Brian, but Brian obviously spends a lot of time in the park. The last time I was here was last year, last year, and places where I know I was able to upload stuff because I've got the upload. It's just dead. So whether something's happened with the cell towers or something's happened with, well, I don't know, communication in general, but even the hotels that had Wi-Fi before, that's been knocked out. So Yellowstone has had some big issues with storms and weather in general, so we're assuming
something fell over.
It broke something pretty big because we've been basically offline. And what's quite amusing is watching David, when he does get signal, just disappear
like
into
a petulant teenager. So
Mm.
very quickly we'll run through. As you can see, we've been to a bunch of places since, I think it was 4 days ago now, approximately. So it's been a while. So we met up with the lesser spotted Brian Creek, which we discovered in the bushes. So if you don't know Brian, he's a photographer.
He's online.
He's online. Oh, hi, Brian. He's a photographer based out in this area. I won't say too much because we recorded an interview with him day before yesterday. So we're going to roll that towards the end of our live stream as well. So you can hear about Brian's photography, environment, and a bunch of other stuff.
And they'll be able to find out at the end who's won the competition.
Yes, so we will have a competition.
Talk about it in a minute.
Yeah, so we are going to have a competition to win a prize. So stick around.
Only
for that
if you're
as well.
live, though.
Yeah, you've got to be live. So no switching off. Brian took us to some deserted, murdery.
Brian picked us up in a great big SUV and then took us into the middle of nowhere into some disused cabins that looked like they'd been used for murders.
Yes. But we survived. Yes. So it was an interesting location anyway. And then what we really wanted to do was go to this location for sunrise. So this is obviously prior to sunrise. And we're going to edit one of these shots as well. So this is a place called Schwabacher's Landing. And obviously there's Paul's BTS, there's my BTS. But it's a great spot. What we didn't take actually, again, was the view behind us, which was, of course, a bunch of people enjoying the sunset, a few photographers and everything as well. There's Brian. There we go.
He's one of the people behind you enjoying the sunrise.
Exactly. On the way to, where were we driving to? I can't remember.
Up to Yellowstone.
Up to Yellowstone, yeah. So from the Grand Tetons National Park up to Yellowstone. This one we shot as a single shot in a pano. So we're going to stitch that together as well. Talk about the different, what's the technical term for those?
Projection settings.
Projection settings.
So we're going to cover, just as a wrap or a quick run through, we're going to cover sunrise edit with mountains.
Yep.
Pano stitching with mountains, but that's also a long exposure as well. We can cover off in there, and then another sunrise with a more reflective thing. So we're going to cover all of those 3 edits today, and then a big one, which is a huge color splurge on the screen.
Yes,
to finish with.
And I bought a hat as well, which you'll see us sporting in the interview with Brian, and this gentleman very kindly stretched it to fit mine. Huge head, exactly. Were we going to edit this one? I can't remember. Yeah. So this is West Thumb Lake.
West Thumb Lake, the part of the Yellowstone River.
Which had some beautiful sky. There's the other BTS, of course. Bison, lots of bison around at the moment, unsurprisingly. Just milling around in the traffic, as you can see. Very large animal. You'll hear Brian talk a little bit about the dangers behind that. And unfortunately, someone was injured a couple of days ago as well. This was also from the safety of the car window.
So that's literally it. And that was taken from my window on an iPhone. So it's right there. And if you were in between those two, that could be fun.
Yeah, definitely. So avoid at all cost. So yeah, as I said, we met up with Brian. This is our setting for, Don't want to print
I
that.
was going to say. Win a print.
Win a print of us three. So this was our setting to record the interview as well. We were going to go up in this. But if you look at the sky, then some weather happened. A couple of people asked on Instagram when I posted this, what app is this? It is Windy, correct?
That's Windy app. So there, just be careful. There is one version of Windy that is the US version, which isn't actually quite as good. It doesn't allow you some of the custom stuff. The version that I use is obviously off the UK App Store, but it works across Europe as well. It's literally called Windy.app in the App Store. But there are others. So we'll also use WindGuru. We'll also use, because that gives you a lot of cloud data as well. But on the move, Windy allows, if you have the premium version, it allows you to create your own custom forecasting. So I can scroll through the things that are important to me. So for instance, you can see on this cloud cover just underneath the temperature, although it's upside down. But you see upper, middle and low clouds, which is really handy, especially when you're doing things like shooting down from a helicopter, because while it may be clear sky in theory, if you've got a load of high-level cloud, you're going to diffuse the light in not a great way. So it's what there are. Many other apps are available, but that's the one that I use. And
it was bang on though, wasn't it? To be honest,
it was spot on. And on the web, we use WindGuru. Now, interestingly, when it comes to taking helicopters up, especially when it's a more complex one with doors off and photo stuff, weight becomes very critical. So I haven't eaten for 3 weeks. And when David heard that we weren't going up in the helicopter on Monday, he went for lunch.
To enjoy a bit of good old-fashioned barbecue. Yeah, it was maybe a bit...
Forgetting that we were going up on Tuesday.
Like, in my defence, there's vegetables.
That's salad, right? And pork.
Yeah.
Cool.
Brian enjoying the XT.
Yep. So we've got Brian playing with the XT camera from phase 1. So cool.
More traffic.
Yeah, and we'll cover that in the video with Brian, but the traffic coming into Yellowstone right now, and then actually all national parks, the US national parks are having a challenge right now. But on Monday, it was crazy when we were there. And Tuesday, the line went from the entrance station through the entire city of West Yellowstone to the other side of the road, which was, I'd a guess, 1.5, 2.5 hours to get into that park. And when you're in the park, it's also just as busy. So just beware if you're heading in.
So we stopped at Old Faithful.
You found that very unimpressive.
It was a bit disappointing, to be honest. I don't know what it was. You can see there's a bunch of people. That's a bit hard to tell. But the crowd gathers to watch. But to be honest, out of all the things that you can go and look at in that Geyser Basin, that's probably the least interesting part. But that's how everything sprang up. But, there you go. This is coming away from
Grand Valley. It's Hayden Valley. So it's coming away from West Thumb up towards the middle of
which is a beautiful valley with little geothermic stuff going on. Steam.
A lot of eggy smell.
Lots
suspiciously eggy smell.
That's my excuse. And bison as well. And this is the Grand Canyon of Yellowstone. Not the Grand Canyon, but the Grand Canyon of Yellowstone. And then we've got a nice waterfall shot with some long exposure. Easy to edit, but actually a nice fix that Paul showed me just before going live, which can improve that as well. And then the weather got better the day after. So fortunately, they had an opening just about. I mean, they were absolutely slammed, but they made it work. So kudos to Yellowstone helicopters. You can see doors are off. So I was in the front, Brian and Paul was in the back, and we got a nice tour over a pretty spectacular geothermic feature, which we're looking at as well.
And actually, to give you some context on the helicopter, because I've had a couple of people ask about it. So you cannot fly a drone in a national park. Please don't try. Don't be that person. And actually, there are some practical reasons. They don't want lithium in the lake, strangely, when you crash it and stuff like that.
True.
But also, you don't want to be in the national park just being buzzed by drones left, right, and centre. If you want an aerial shot over Yellowstone, you're going to need to be in a helicopter. They are not cheap to organise, and they need organising. That's the thing. You can't just turn up. They need a flight plan. They need to agree it with the National Park Service. You've got a very limited time over the locations that you want to be in. I mean, if we go to that one.
This one.
So, that's Brian shooting directly over Grand Prismatic. You're going to need certain lenses, certain kit. It's a very, very detailed, thought-through process to make that work. Don't come to Yellowstone thinking you're going to get an aerial shot with just turning up and asking how to do it. you're going to need to put some planning in.
And for the first time in his life, Paul had to use a camera strap.
I had to use a camera strap. I've never, ever had a camera strap. Now, just as context, that is the most ridiculous camera to shoot from a helicopter with.
Yeah.
That is a technical camera. So it's the Phase 1 XT technical camera that does not have any form of focus, doesn't even have a trigger button because I'm using a 138mm lens, so I'm having to trigger it from the back screen. At 138mm, it's pretty tough to keep it steady on a helicopter that's still moving. So kids, don't do what we did, just do what we say.
Use a normal camera like me. Yeah.
But yeah, so yeah, aerial.
Sweet. Okay. Enough
And
talk.
then we finally got on saddles.
Oh, saddles. I missed that. Hang on. Yeah.
Cowboy hats and saddles.
The only saddle that we sat on, which was in a bar. Exactly.
So, edits.
Edits, right. Okay, so this is the finished, well, it was a quick workup, a finished product from Schwabacher's Landing. So this was 50 seconds, you can see in the bottom left-hand corner, and it's a little bit flat and hazy. There's a lot of haze going on in the morning in general, isn't there?
Yeah, there is.
So,
well, it's kind of a bit of a double-edged sword. We want moisture in the air to be able to get some mist. So if you zoom into that far end, you'll see there's actually mist starting to build on the river, and it starts to grow. So you want moisture in the air, but you don't want too much because then you get haze across the mountains, which loses their texture.
Yeah. So I've got to remember how I edited this because I haven't looked at it for a few days, but bear with. So obviously we can kind of split this picture up into 3 different areas. So we've got sky, we've got the Tetons, and we've got the foreground. Now, there's tons of different ways that you could approach this. Probably before doing any of layer editings, there's not a great deal I would do except perhaps warm it up a little tiny bit, but everything else I'm going to leave as is because I kind of want to deal with them separately. So let's take the sky. So if I make a new layer, always name your layers, kids, and one thing we can do is a graduation filter, but as I said, I kind of want to treat the sky separately to the mountains. So if we just throw in a grad filter, option key to make it non-symmetric or asymmetric, I guess that would be. And then I've got kind of graduation creeping down the sky like so. However,
well, just to explain that the option key, the reason it's important. On a graduated filter on a layer in Capture One, you've got 3 lines. The middle line is the 50% line.
This one,
the top line is the 100% line. So anything north or beyond that line is 100% applied on the mask.
So we can shift the mask down. Like that.
Anything south or beyond the bottom line is 0%. So by using the option key and doing it asymmetrically, we're changing the fall off. So in other words, it's a very slow fall off between 100% at the top and 50% in the middle. And then a very fast fall off from 50% down to 0 because David's moved that independently. If you don't hold the option key, it will move it linearly, so it's proportionate, top to bottom. If you hold the option key, you can control the fall off from top to middle or from middle to bottom.
And if you don't know, I've just turned on the grayscale mask, this one here, so you can actually see how the gradient mask varies. But for this exercise, it's actually nicer to see the picture, so I'm going to go for that. However, I'm going to further restrict the mask with a luma range. So it kind of cuts around the mountains a little bit. Now I could have just magic brushed the sky, but sometimes I feel if you precisely select the sky, and we talk about AI in a minute, it can, and I've almost overcooked it when I was trying it before, that it can look a bit clinical, that you've got sky, thing in the middle, foreground or whatever. And of course, yes, we're playing with the light to some extent, but it still has to look natural. So if I turn on luma range, I essentially want all the
bright stuff.
All the bright stuff, and then we're squeezing that down, and then eventually we get to the point where it's pretty much close around.
So personally, there. I would come in more to remove some of the mountains and use a manual brush to fill in the bits at the top. Come up a bit, so you're clear of here. No.
Back that way.
Yeah, a bit more.
There.
So because I'm not worried about going over any lines or anything like that, leaving some of the rough stuff at the top for the sake of keeping the mountains completely clear is a good trade-off. Because we can always fill that stuff in. What I don't want to be doing is drawing a brush around the detail because you're going to get it wrong.
And the cool thing is, remember this is a gradient mask with the luma range on, so as we play around with the gradient, it's actually snipping its way around the mountains quite nicely. And it's subtle, but there's a gradual fall off there, which just helps to make it a bit more subtle. So now what we want to do is rasterize this, like so, and then do as Paul says, grab the...
Just delete.
I just delete. Good job, David. Grab the erase brush, because we can see the add brush, and just add a little bit of mask into the top there. So let's just make that a bit smaller, free flow, and then we can just paint in.
So you're using the Luma range to save you having to drive around detail, but you're using the traditional brush to fill in the gaps that obviously, because the problem is that those bits were obviously the same luminosity as some of the parts of the mountain, so you can't have both. So
now we got that, which is closer to that. Just touch that bit in there a little, like so. And as it's a little bit binary cut around there, what we can do is right click and say refine, and that will just give us a... So if we back that off and crank it up, that would just give us a nicer flow. So yeah, you could just say magic brush select sky and it works. It did that, but it's just maybe a little bit too binary. So what we're going to do on the sky, well, first of all, we can probably throw in some clarity just to get those clouds out a bit more. And I probably, if I remember correctly, darkened it down. But it's only a subtle change. As I said, I probably overcooked it on that one to some extent, because I just want to see a bit more of the clouds going on, but not overdoing it a bit. And you can always go back and play with it. So I might return to that and then tweak it a little bit more.
And you're getting away with it in this shot. But just one thing for everyone to bear in mind. Please be very careful that if you are going to edit the sky and the sky is reflected, you also edit the reflection to match. Exactly. I see so many pictures where they've either changed the white balance on the sky or it's super clarified and then the reflection just doesn't match.
Yeah, if we could see these clouds, you know, we'd have to be careful. So now we want the mountains. And this actually can be picked up with a magic brush quite nicely. Helps if you turn your mask on first, M on the keyboard. And what's my tolerance set to? Let's see. So if we do a little squiggle like that, not bad. There's a touch there. Probably this bit over here. And we don't have the snow, but this edit is more in, I guess, critical. There we go. Get it, most of it. And if I go too far, Command Z, like so. So now we've got pretty nice mask there. If we do Option M, you can see what it looks like. Again, I would probably refine it a little bit.
But what I wouldn't do is leave it at the 300. So you saw when David loaded that up at 300, it's starting to grab ground. It's starting to grab other things that are similar. So pull it back a bit. Anything more than about 50 is starting to soften the edges. Anything more than 100, you're starting to spread the mask. At 300, it's really softening everything up.
Yeah.
So I would be in a sort of 80 to 100 place on there.
Around there. So it's just taking the edge off the edges a little bit. So now we've got our mountain here. There's lots of options that we could do. I mean, there's clarity, of course, so we can throw in some more clarity. We can pull in the black levels, like so, making sure that we're not going to clip anything on our output histogram. We could go to a curve, and we could fine-tune exactly what we want contrast-wise, like so, which now takes out that lack of contrast.
You need to add in a mask in there behind that tree.
Oh, a tiny... Where is it? Just there. Yeah. So if we go back to our magic brush and see right-click, you can make this a bit smaller. Remember, if the magic brush is too big, there you go, it might start grabbing... No, stuff. So if the brush had hit the tree and the mountain, then we obviously would get that. There we go. And then for the foreground... I think what I did, I made a new layer, and let's call this FG, and then we can right click and you can copy the mask from the mountains. So that gives me that. And then I think, I might be completely off it here, but if I invert that mask, then I get that, and then I can hand brush out the sky. At least I think that's what I did. Yeah, so then I can grab the eraser. So I'm going from memory here, or we might even be able to magic eraser it actually. There you go.
Yeah,
like
get rid of the line.
Yeah, so if I grab the eraser as normal, just a whoops. What did I take? Oh, it's a magic
razor.
brush.
So one thing to bear in mind, Capture One's going to remember on your layer what you last used. So if you press E, if you last used the magic versions, it will go to the magic eraser. If you press E and you were last using the traditional versions, it will go to the traditional eraser.
So now in the foreground, again, you can do what you want. I'll bring up the brightness a little bit, add in a bit more clarity, and play around with that from there. Now I've got the ability to think, oh, did I overdo this? I can pull my opacity down if I want to. Did I overdo the sky? I could pull that back and forth a bit and just spend a bit of time balancing up those different elements.
But in every, especially with landscapes, in every single edit that you do, each time you make a significant change, which to me would always be, I'm adding another layer.
Yeah.
Do a before and after. Just do that quick sweep to see, have I gone too far?
Yeah.
So there's one thing bringing it back to what you saw. There's another thing bringing it back to what you wish you saw. And in this case, it's actually pretty far. It's pretty spot on. I mean, the phone pictures we've got are similar. Although phones, you're noticing it more now we're out here.
Yeah.
The phones are really over processing stuff now.
Yeah.
They're really pushing saturation.
Yeah, like if we look at the before when I took that, well, I don't know if it will show on the BTS actually. I think it was too early in the morning.
Yeah, when we were actually shooting, you weren't getting.
Yeah. So, but you throw your phone at it, and my God, it really, like there's clouds, there's this and that, so you do have to back off a bit. I saw a comment from
William says you're doing great so far.
Oh, thanks, William.
So no pressure.
There was a comment from Prasad about in the Luma range tool. Yes, you've got radius and sensitivity, which do a similar thing as refining. So you can use that here as well. When radius is at 0, it will essentially do nothing. Hang on a minute. So if I just whack Luma range on now and just cut something out. So with radius at 0, sensitivity slider has no function. So as we bring up the radius, then you'll start to see the ability to refine. So you can also do it here. But it means that if you've kind of gone too far and then I've rasterized, you can't go back. So at least if I rasterize my start point, I can then refine how I would wish, and after deleting that there as well. All right, that's that.
Cool. Mountains, check.
Mountains, check. Nothing much to show here if you look at the before and after. This was a quick roadside stop. The only thing that was necessary here, I warmed it up a bit and added a bit more contrast, but that was a very straightforward edit. Same for that guy as well. Next. Okay, pano stitch. So you saw the BTS of this, so that's where I was stood. And then obviously on the camera I was using, which was the Fujifilm X-H2, no nodal rail, so it's just rotating about the tripod point. So you can see obviously to the left, to the right, we're kind of turning on an axis, so it's not necessarily ideal. But if I select all of these three, right click, say stitch to panorama, we're going to pop up into our stitch window, and then you get a choice of these projections. Panini is the longest one it takes to calculate, so
well, it's doing the most work.
Yeah.
So spherical is your traditional. That's your standard sort of football approach to a panoramic. Cylindrical will try and keep lines straight, effectively in the middle, but then it will give up on the edges, so you still get the sort of bulbous effect. Perspective, if you're not shifting your camera, don't touch this one, because it's going to be weird in the result.
Yeah, so and we lose a lot of resolution.
Perspective's designed for, like on the Phase 1 XT that you saw around my neck on the helicopter, I can shift the sensor independently of the lens. That's what perspective is for. Panini, if you are doing a broad sweep, especially with things that are way far out in the distance, Panini counteracts the bulging that you get traditionally, because as the stuff nearest to you is literally bigger and the stuff further away is smaller, the traditional spherical and cylindricals get smaller as they go away. Panini compensates for that. So it squishes the middle, expands the edges, so it tries to keep it almost like you're using a shift camera on the same plane, and the result is a lot cleaner, a lot flatter, and probably more usable.
Looks like a bow tie.
Yeah.
So I won't assemble that one because it was done here. So let's do a clone. Just reset that. So there's our stitch result, before and after. Again, what did I do to this one? It was 4 days ago. Or maybe you edited this one.
I didn't.
Didn't you? Oh, it was me. Looks like a layer. So let's crop first of all. We don't lose too much, actually. It's all right. And at least with having a bit of extra black area, you can fill that in as you wish. So here's our basic shot. Nice tree. I think I'd healed those out, or I was going to.
You
those
deleted
national
trees.
park trees. Yeah, exactly. It's a little tiny bit under, but I don't want to bring the exposure up, but just a touch of that.
So the problem with using HDR for your exposure is, or to bring it up, is you're going to increase the amount of haze that's seen effectively because you're flattening.
Yeah.
Again, that contrast. So I'd be in a place of using levels on this one, probably just to stretch the histogram out.
So if we look at our levels, see we've got very little data, well, practically no data up in the highlights, not a lot down here. So you can hit the auto button. If you're worried that it's going to be a little bit aggressive, we can just pull those in. But you get a pretty quick, if we just do before and after, dramatic pop increase in that without really having to use a bunch of different tools to achieve that. Again, this would probably benefit from a gradation. Shift key will keep it straight or to 45 degree or 90. And again, it doesn't need to be, saying that, hold shift down, doesn't need to be that gradual fall off. So option key or alt, if you're on a PC, means we can make it a bit more dramatic. Do we like the cool haze in the mountains or not? I don't know.
Your choice. On the previous edit, you didn't.
I obviously did not like that. It was a little bit aggressive there, I think. But there's nothing to stop you doing an additional levels correction on that.
It'd be the same as the previous one with a magic brush across the mountain and then just a quick levels.
Quick levels tweak and so on. Again, with the sky and so on and so forth, we can tweak that up a bit. Sometimes if you're worried about a color cast, if you find your color balance tool, say, well, in the shadows are looking a bit cold, then we can go to the opposite side of that.
And the problem is they're all midtones.
Oh, hang on.
The shadows are your foreground trees, the mountains are actually in the
midtones.
There
you go. So if we pull the midtones across, then we can cancel out some of that as well.
Quick comment break.
Yes.
So, a couple of things. Number one, Plinio, I think your name is. When I try and build panos, the bar loads, and when it's finished, nothing happened to my panos, just do not appear. Any advice? My suggestion is they probably have appeared, but one of two things is happening.
Yeah.
Either it'll produce what's called a DNG that comes out, and you'll find it at the underneath the last selected image out of the list that you've created.
So if we right-click and say Show in Finder, then you'll see there's my DNG.
Yeah. But in your actual Capture One, it will appear in your browser. It'll appear the last one after the selected image that you had as the final one.
Yeah.
What I have seen quite a lot, so the second option for where you can't find it, is that there's a filter on your browser. So a lot of people will filter by raw file type or by whatever color code
tags,
or whatever.
Filtering,
and of course, you're putting in a new file as a DNG, and Capture One assumes that you don't want that one because you filtered it out, so it doesn't show it. So I'd check your filters, but also have a hunt around. 9 times out of 10, when someone's mentioned that problem, we do find it.
Yeah.
It's just it wasn't where they were expecting.
No.
The other one yesterday, I can't remember who it was. I think it was someone called Roger, but I may have got it wrong. Was asking about what screen resolution do you use because it's clearer than the version that they were using.
Yeah. So I think on my displays, where are you? Displays. So I'm on the default actually,
which is using pixel doubling.
Yeah.
On a Mac. So
yeah.
Modern displays are quite often using Retina technology to double up pixels to make things look sharper. You can choose to use your display. So I choose to use mine at almost 1:1. It's not quite, but so ridiculously high resolution, so I can get huge amounts of stuff on the screen, but you end up having to sit like this.
Yeah, you get more real estate, but at the expense of eyesight.
So the default there is, if you click on it, it'll give you 1512 by 982 is the equivalent in resolution, and that's what you're seeing pretty much on YouTube. You're seeing 1440 by whatever the other thing is,
2560. Yeah,
something.
Yeah.
But yeah, so resolution is down to a couple of things. One, how much real estate do you need on the screen? And two, how good are your eyes, frankly? Now, if you need more screen real estate and your eyes aren't very good, get a second monitor. It is that simple. Just get a second monitor. You will make your life so much easier rather than trying to manage all the windows and see everything.
Yeah.
Which is what we have here. Which is why we're having to look over there, because it's miles away.
Yeah, we're looking, there's a TV across the other side of the room. Any others?
That's it for now.
Okay. So long exposure.
Oh, Ash said from last time, I managed to correct the distorted moon in the Pano thing.
Oh, nice.
Using the skew and aspect controls.
Great.
Which is a great feature.
Cool. That's good. Excellent.
Fixed.
So we've got this guy. The reason why I'm cloning and not saying new is because I've got a filter on. So if I say new, then it won't have the filter, and then I have to go digging for it. So that's why I'm doing that. Before anyone comments. So this is our long exposure of 4 minutes, which was fairly hefty. Double stacked with filters, I think.
You had an ND64 and an ND1000.
So it's 16 stops.
In reality, we should have done probably about 6 minutes, but it got boring.
Yeah, exactly. And also the cloud was changing actually pretty quickly.
It started disappearing.
And with a 4 minute exposure, then this particular camera, as most cameras, then have to do a 4 minute black calibration. So that would have meant 8 minutes.
Mine doesn't.
I know yours doesn't. Yeah. But then by that point, the clouds would have gone. So it was best to stick with that. So it's a little bit on the flat side. There was also a polarizer there as well. It's also probably slightly underexposed.
And just photographically, this is a very good point to just mention. The polarizer piece. Typically, you'd never use a polarizer on two things. One, a wide lens. And two, towards or away from the sun, because it's not actually helping you with much. In this case here, we were pointing away from the sun, but the sun's at a relatively low angle still. And it was creating a very, very strong effect out there. So using it directly away from the sun means you don't get that bulge that you quite often see in circular polarizers on a wide lens. But this was the only scenario where we'd realistically use a polarizer on a ultra wide lens, and it worked. Yeah.
The only disadvantage is we've got
a bit of darkness.
Darkness, which is not reflected over on the right-hand side.
Yeah.
So we need to fix that. But correction so far is just levels and brightness and a slight tweak in white balance. Again, we probably don't have to run through it, but we could throw in a graduated filter, fix any haziness that we see here. For this area, which is a little bit darker, you can do a couple of things. Probably the accelerated thing to do is grab a style brush, find your built-in style brushes and look under light and contrast. We could dodge, which is a little bit of brightening. So as soon as you pick dodge, then Capture One will set up the brush to the reasonably correct parameters. You can always tweak it, just make that a bit bigger. And then we can dodge away this area quite softly and get that back. Now it's still a little bit dark here, so you could combine. We could grab Shadows Recoverer and then pull out a little bit of shadows in that area, which was a bit strong, so we can back that down a bit. But with not much effort, you could spend a bit more time and just balance up those areas.
And a fun one with this, if ever you're doing long exposures with a really deep blue sky and bright white clouds, have a play with the deep sky brush by name. It will be quite extreme in terms of its output, but it's under the enhancement section of the built-in brushes. You want a nice big brush, and just plaster across, and then you can always back it away. But deep sky is almost like a polarizer for anything that's got a nice contrast between the clouds and the sky. As I say, it can be a bit strong, so you might want to back it away in opacity later on. And you can choose, but it's a really good option for making the sky.
And if you're struggling with drawing around something, don't just use nothing to stop you changing the mask on that layer. So I don't know how well the magic brush will work on here, but if I was to just clear my mask and then try and magic brush that back in, then you might be able to fit it around nicer, like so. So if I look at the mask, what's it done? So, whoops. Whoa! Extreme zoom. Magic brush, and then pull in that spot, pull in that spot, pull in that spot. Oh, too much. So if that happens, let's take the size and the tolerance down a bit, or we could just use a traditional brush to do that last little bit over here. And then we've deep skied with the
got a little hold
magic brush,
but I think magic brush might struggle with that.
Oh yeah, just there. Right click, bring that down, and we can do a whatever.
You would do this in more detail.
In more detail and a bit more care, but then we magic brush the sky, like so. And that will be full, which is a bit much, but in some cases it works. And then to nothing, so you can find your balance. In terms of AI stuff, being able
Wouldn't
to...
it be handy if I could just say, click the mountain?
Exactly, which is coming. So we've said that publicly on our forum at support.captureone.com, which you should all join. It's obviously been a popular feature request. We're looking into it. Work has begun. It's looking great so far. So yeah, you can expect that in the future. But doesn't mean that it then, oh, okay, that replaces Magic Brush. No, it doesn't necessarily, because AI, of course, is a technology which works extremely well, but there's always some danger of it not doing what you think you want it to do. So you've also got tools like the Magic Brush, Luma masking, refining the mask, and so on to add to that.
With Magic Brush's introduction and even Luma range, everyone forgot that you have auto mask.
Yes.
So the original tool, please, when a new tool comes out, don't forget the old ones.
Yeah,
they're added for a reason. They're not replacing, they're adding. You've still got other tools in your toolbox.
I can't remember why I put these ones in. I think it was, these are close-ups. So it's quite hard to get perspective sometimes. So this is, I don't know, a few meters away from me, 6 foot and so on. So just looking at the ground. But what I noticed with a lot of these kind of, why can't I go next? Oh, because that was the last picture. That's why, David. What I noticed with a lot of these, if I reset this one, they are relatively flat. So if you do have a relatively flat image, look at the histogram. This is, exposure quite nicely sat in the middle. So deal with it either with the levels, and you've got instant pop, or a combination of, if I just take this out, don't forget you've got your curves tool as well. They're essentially doing similar things, but with the curve tool, you've got more control. With the levels tool, you're stretching that histogram out.
And what I'd always do, your histogram thing on the top left of the tool set, have that expanded. If you're starting to make changes to anything, that's giving you your actual output, your print output effectively. Whereas levels is representing what came out of the camera's raw with the curve applied. So
don't do that.
Yeah.
Like the moment you start chopping into the histogram, if you look what's happening or chopping into the levels, you'll see in the histogram we're just slicing away data. So there's absolutely nothing going on. If you look up here at the RGB values, there's nothing. So it just doesn't look good. The argument sometimes I hear is, well, I want to build contrast. Well, you can still build contrast without destroying any detail in the blacks, either by using your curves. If you're not confident with curves, there's nothing wrong with using a slider.
There are styles with crushed blacks, there are styles with faded blacks, but it's done intentionally.
Yeah.
Don't do it just as a default. I want huge contrast, so therefore drop the blacks off, drop the highlights out, and then you're screwed.
Yeah, no, definitely don't do that. And again, what am I at? F8. So this was also a good example of have a look, does diffraction correction help? Yes, does a tiny bit in this case. Again, that's going to be dependent on your camera lens sensor combination. So don't just put it on by default, because that will extend your export time. So there's no point turning on a function that does nothing just to sit around and wait for images to export for further. All right, getting close to...
I was saying time zones, cover this one and then go to your aerial, and then we'll...
Oh yeah, talk about competition and run the video. So let's just put levels back. This is not an aerial photo. This is again...
It could be though.
It could be. It honestly could be. It's very difficult to get a sense of scale. I guess this little thermal pot is probably yay big.
3 feet wide.
Yeah, something like that. Again, if I clone this guy, reset that. This was a 30 seconds, so not very long.
On a moving boardwalk.
On a moving boardwalk. So we did spend quite a long time standing there.
How many shots have you got to try and get that one?
Quite a few.
About 20?
If I do show in library. Where was it?
So the reason I'm flagging that is I see quite often when people... Well, actually, it wasn't too bad.
Not too bad.
I did quite a few more than that. But
I was getting hot. Yeah.
People, quite often people will get to a location and... So for instance, the boardwalks all around these things, they're there for the protection of the land underneath, but they're moving. The second there's a person on it, it moves.
It moves a lot.
And if you're trying to do a long exposure to get that water effect, you'll go... Yeah, there's more there.
There's
so
lots. Yeah,
you're going to get frustrated. Now, you've got two choices. You can either cut and run and say, this isn't going to work, or you can persist. Persisting means you're going to be stood there for 20, 30 minutes, But at the end of the day, you got that one shot that works out of all the ones that didn't, and you're really happy with it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it was worth hanging around the wait. When I looked at it in the camera, I wasn't sure if I could get something from it. Now that might look a bit outrageously edited.
Well, to explain where the mid-tones are coming from, imagine over a long exposure.
Yeah.
Especially on an additive long exposure, so a traditional one, this thing is steaming. So that steam is moving all the way around the pot, and on a long exposure, you're picking up every single bit of that steam and adding it to the frame. So you're effectively adding haze the longer you expose.
Indeed.
If you exposed it forever, you might actually end up scrubbing out a lot of the background.
Any detail in there, yeah. So I think, I'm trying to remember what I did, but I believe it warmed it up not that much, and probably threw in a fair amount of saturation again, because that steam is taking away a lot of that color and tone and so on. I guess it's almost like having a soft filter in front of the
You could almost use dehaze on it.
Yeah, probably.
To an extent.
So let's take out...
well, if you reset and just as an experiment, let's try dehaze.
Which is a combination of levels and contrast and a bunch of other stuff. Yeah, it's pretty good. All it needs really, then
pop of saturation.
A bit more saturation.
I'd argue it's better.
It is actually. It's not quite as, that's a little aggressive, but depends what you're going for, doesn't it?
But dehaze works. There you go. There's live haze gone.
Live haze. I'd probably put a bit more clarity in there as well. But yeah, really interesting things. I've got loads of pictures of these, which I can bore people with at home, but they make quite nice abstract subjects. At 30 seconds, there's probably a little bit of...
You're pretty good.
It's not bad. A little bit of movement there.
You got a little bit of an issue here with focus at the very tight, of the closest part to you. Got some diffraction in there and so on, but in broad terms, it works. It'll print.
Yeah, it'll print. It's got slightly edge taken off it, but not too bad. I didn't took off my filter. Let's put that back on, because I think that's what we wanted to look at in... Oh, we've also got this.
We'll come back to that maybe. So we might do an extended... Extra special.
Extra special, yeah.
So Grand Prismatic, going back to what we said earlier about you cannot fly a drone over here, don't try.
Yeah.
But you can, with organisation, get above it. There is certain regulation and certain limits to how high
not for very long.
You can't be there very long. It's a specified flight path. There isn't any discussion about can we go again or anything like that. It's a case of get it right first time.
Yeah.
So approaching this, pretty bumpy up there because you've got a load of geothermal stuff going on and wind and so on. These are on long lenses, which are typically the worst thing you can put in a helicopter, but long lens with a polarizer to bring out the color in there, and shooting at a really high shutter speed, so about 1,000th of a second or more. I think some of yours you were 2,500, 3,000 a second. Yeah. I
was quite paranoid because I could feel the camera moving around. Is 1,000th enough? It was. In retrospect, but thought it's not like we can land and say, let's do that again.
Well, we can, but ouch. So one option is you get a stabilizer, so you can get
the gyro
or something like that. Yeah, but there's a company that make them really, really well. But they're heavy gyros that will keep the camera steady. The other is just keep your shutter speed up high, which is what David's done here.
Yeah, so ISO 800, 2.5 thousandths of a second. This actually, the shutter speed went up quite considerably, or got faster once over this because all that light being thrown back. I thought I'd messed up because at one point, I can't remember what the max shutter speed is of this. This was shot on the Sony because I wanted as many megapixels as possible. So it's 67 on the A7R. So I could crop a bit tighter, but because it's got quite fine pixel pitch, I was worried about camera shake. But yeah, it actually performed better than I thought. To give you an idea of scale, this is on approach. You can see the car park over there in the bottom left.
And the traffic.
Of course, as usual, waiting to get in.
Actually, and that's all parked.
People have abandoned their cars to the left and right, even though there was space in the car park. Maybe not. That's the RV parking. Yeah. You can see the boardwalk, which kind of wraps around it.
It actually wasn't that busy.
No, because it's not totally crowded. So that was on approach, and then this was going overhead. So if we zoom in, you can see the resolution. And really important point with the polarizer, without Paul being here, I wouldn't have put that on the lens because I just didn't have the experience to know that. But there was a massive difference from looking through the lens, rotating the polarizer and seeing it with and without the effect. There was tons of glare coming off the land, almost, again, like having steam across the whole picture. So having the polarizer take that out meant you could see deeper into it's not a lake, but deeper into the pool, the water body, against all kinds of other water features as well. You could see into it.
In terms of, we said we'd have a competition. So we're going to send out a print to someone who is live online right now, but only if you're live online right now. So really simple question. And we're going to give you the time it takes for Brian Creek to tell you about himself and about Yellowstone and some of the challenges that are going on in Yellowstone. So that's about 15 minutes. You've got 15 minutes during Brian to come back with the answer. So the question is...
I'll take that away. Screen. I know, that was a quick clue. So hopefully you remembered...
It doesn't really help because it wasn't at that point.
Hopefully you remembered everything that you can see on the instrument panel. Good.
So... at the exact point that this photograph was taken, what height above ground level?
Not sea level, ground level.
Not elevation, so what height above ground level were we at? So if you put that in the comments, we will pick the person that is closest to the actual height after you've watched this.
Watch Brian. Shall we roll Brian now or edit this? Or we can
roll him and come
roll Brian and come back. Cool. So we're going to roll Brian. It's about a little 10-15 minute chat, I believe. So once that's finished, then we'll
see you back with a winner.
With a winner. So height in feet, wasn't it? In feet.
AGL.
Above the ground, not the sea level, because that was significantly greater.
Yes.
And we'll pick a winner. All right, let's press the right button and roll Brian. Hi everybody, as we said in the live part of the live stream you've just seen, we've got this pre-recorded section with our guest, Brian Creek, more from Brian in a second. We've stepped out of Yellowstone Park to make this recording. There is no signal, there is no Wi-Fi, there's very little, so we've come here so at least we can get this part wrapped up. So, as you know, the story so far with Paul and myself traveling through the Midwest.
We're now in the West.
The West, sorry?
We're now in the West.
The West.
For the pedants.
You can tell from the hats.
Yeah.
See?
Exactly. Brian is someone who Paul and I have come to know over the past year.
3 years?
2-3 years? Yeah. Brian is a regular attendee of live streams, which I've been doing on the Capture One channel. Paul's been doing on his channel. And we thought it would be nice and fitting to actually meet up with someone who knows the area, who we know as well, because it's not often that we get to do that as well.
Well, also Brian has been posting nice pictures from one of my favourite places on the planet, so I threatened that we'll just turn up and do dinner.
And knock on his door.
Yeah, so here we are.
So here we are. Brian, perhaps you can tell us, just briefly who you are and what you do in this area of the US.
So the camera, just state your name, age, occupation.
Inside leg.
My name's Brian Creek. I'm living in the greater Yellowstone ecosystem since 2011. I've been a photographer, a real active, serious photographer since 1986, but I've been a photographer since I was 6 years old. This is my first camera.
Is it digital?
No.
It is medium format though. So technically it's an upgrade.
Yeah.
So, and that obviously is from sort of childhood, but you've moved through cameras to that point over that period of time. So what you started with that, what did you go through and where did you get to now?
Photography was a big deal in my house because my family owned some newspapers and my dad was one of the photographers. We did everything, but photography was one of the things. And he's one of those big press cameras that like Jimmy Olsen and Superman
with the gunpowder flash.
Around. Yeah. And so I learned photography, darkroom process, printing, all on large format, which was great because I could see stuff. And then in the mid 80s, I bought a Canon kit, the F1 and a bunch of FD lenses, 35 millimeter, shot primarily slides, almost exclusively slides, up until 2010, and then moved into digital and started using Adobe products, Lightroom, until about 2020, when I was locked into my house, like all of us, found Capture One had a free 30-day trial. I tried as I like this, but boy, there's a lot of buttons and things. And then I got an email that says, hey, we're going to have some free lessons. And I thought, okay, good. And so I started following along with these guys.
And the rest is history.
And the rest is history.
Here we are.
I've learned so much from this.
This isn't what you intended at that point, is it? This wasn't happening in your head.
Nothing was happening in my head. I was hoping to get out of the house.
Cool, which you did.
Yeah.
And actually to that point, so getting out of the house, you've spent, 12 years or so in this area, but then during that time, you've actually now transitioned to be doing stuff with Yellowstone National Park. So you're not just photographer, as it were, you're also working with them to help other photographers.
Right, and I have what's called a commercial use authorization to present photography workshops. And I do custom private photography workshops for individuals in very small groups. If we don't all fit in my SUV, you're too big of a group.
It's a big SUV though.
Yes, it is a big SUV.
Okay, so in that sort of line of work or whatever, you obviously come across different entry points, let's say, into both photography and national parks.
Right.
So if we sort of split the two out individually, so David can pick on the national park bit in a minute, but photographically, someone coming into Yellowstone, never been here before, trip of a lifetime, they're going to want to shoot probably a mix of wildlife and landscape, which you cover both. So what are they packing for each of those in their kit bag?
Sure. Well, as everybody says, the kit you have is the best kit for you. You don't have to go out and spend $1 million to come out here. You can shoot with your iPhone. If you have a more advanced kit and more advanced desires, you can do that as well. You're going to want to cover from wide angle around 15 to 20, 24 millimeters up to 300, 400, 600 and up. The wildlife here is, they call it charismatic megafauna, which means that it's really interesting and big, and they can hurt and kill you and they won't feel bad about it. So you have to stay a prescribed distance away, 25 yards for plant eaters and 100 yards for meat eaters.
We were trapped in a load of bison this morning, and yeah, if we'd been under them, they wouldn't have known.
No.
2,000 pounds, they can run 40 miles an hour, they can jump over a 4-foot-high fence from a standing start.
So we're dead.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So
don't upset the bison.
So I've got my kit bag. I've got in there a long lens, and so when you're talking about a long lens for wildlife, specifically in Yellowstone, given those distances, you're not talking about a 70 to 200.
No, although if you have a 72 to 200, you can put a doubler on, and you're good with the.
Well, it's got a smaller aperture as a result,
right?
But
The loss of light and the loss of sharpness, that's fine. It just depends on what your goal is. Know how to use your equipment. Don't come out here with a bag or a box of equipment that you've never opened, with uncharged batteries, with I need memory cards. What are those? And that's happened.
I know, I did it. No, I didn't. But actually, it's a serious thing. So there's all well and good sort of planning what equipment to bring, but actually you've got to know that equipment. It's not just a case of planning it, getting the box, and bringing it. Right. You must have used it before, surely, in order to get the best.
Even
out of it.
in the backyard or the living room, take pictures of the dog. But I am not an inexpensive guide by Yellowstone standards at all, and you don't want to pay me. Well, maybe you do. If you want to pay me to teach you how to use your camera instead of going around to iconic locations and finding iconic wildlife, we can do that. But that may not be the best use of your money.
Not the best value of time, really, is it? And things happen quickly. The animals we saw this morning could be gone in a flash. Landscape changes instantly as well. So if you're fumbling or don't know what to do, then yeah.
And that's an excellent point to make, because there's no guarantees we're going to see wildlife or the weather's going to be good.
Yeah.
There are no refunds for that.
Person in National Park, what's the worst thing they can do as a character trait?
Be aggressive and run right up to the front of the crowd to get close to the animals, or say, I want to take a picture of this, and get off of the boardwalk in the thermal areas and break through the crust and scald themselves. These are things that are going to end up in the news, and my name might be associated with it, so please don't do that.
Environmentally wise, it's something we've been, or at least Paul and I have been talking amongst ourselves. The expansion of these areas, it's getting busy. Last year we went to Iceland, that was getting busy. Like, how have you seen this area change over 10 years as well?
Well, it's been since '77, so that's a little bit more. But it used to be that Yellowstone would get, 800,000, 1 million people. In 2021, they had 5 million people, and they had July where they had 1 million people in the park in 1 month. It was insane. And if everybody doesn't behave, if everybody doesn't have a attitude of, well, of course there's a lot of people here, I'm going to make the best of it. Don't be a whiner.
Yeah, and actually, so from a practical point of view, 1 million people in a month, 1 million people drop one tiny little piece of litter.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a bit of an issue. But yeah, so the almost the expectation management, I guess, is what you're talking about. So on the one hand, absolutely be the best visitor you can. But on the other hand, accept that other people are going to be here. You are not going to have Yellowstone on your own, ever.
No.
A lot of the photos that you see in the magazine, on my website, that Paul goes over when he's showing us editing tricks, and David, they don't show that there's a huge queue behind you of people taking the exact same picture, and people are jostling for position. We were talking the other day about how at sunrise you get there and you get set up and you think that everything's great, and then somebody comes and says, "Oh, that's a good spot," and moves right in front of you. There can be conflict.
So don't be that person,
Right.
But accept that person exists.
Right.
Is almost the...
And I found generally manners work, and sometimes they don't, and you have to go to other means.
That's for another tape.
Yeah.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about that switch. So you were using PC Creative Suite from Adobe before, and then switched across in 2019 to now. So how easily and flawlessly has that transition happened, Brian?
Well, Capture One I really like. It's more intuitive for me. I feel more free using that over Lightroom. It just, as a product for me, it's superior, and it has to work for you. So you need to try a bunch of things on, just like clothes. I'll tell you, having 3+ years of working with Capture One, the edits I'm doing now are much, much superior to the ones I don't got anymore.
I think that's the same for
Yeah.
for most of us, actually. I
go back to
learning.
shoots I did years back and go, actually, I'll give that one a go now.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's
Yeah,
different.
and what the hell was I thinking?
Before, my preferred style was to try to salvage pictures that I liked that weren't probably the best pictures I had, and now I've become much better at editing ruthlessly, and I'm trying to winnow that 70,000, and now it's 100,000, down to just the selects, just the 5 stars, and work with those. And I'll keep some of the others as record shots. Early on, I couldn't believe how cool it was if you could just slide all the sliders to the right, and all the colors and the sharpness and stuff was so cool. Well, you all know, that's not what you
great
do.
power comes responsibility, as we say. Yeah.
And so, bearing that in mind, you're a big fan of printing your stuff as well.
Yep.
So, and that's coming out of Capture One.
Yep.
Yep.
And that's, we've talked some before, but that's one of my favorite features is the print proofing module, to be able to see the acuity of different sizes, to match them with the different sizes. It makes a difference when you send it off to a lab where you're just an account number often.
You get no surprises.
You get some surprises, but you get way fewer surprises.
Okay. Normally when you put the sliders to the right.
Yeah. And I spent 10 days in Yosemite in May, and I took my iPad with Capture One on it and was able to, at the end of the day, go through and select and delete stuff, and do some edits. I haven't used anything cloud-based, but
as a culling tool and as a preview.
Yeah, and to see, I could do this will work. And one of the things that it helped is like, okay, tomorrow when I go out, I have to remember to do it this way, because what I did today that I thought was what I wanted wasn't exactly what I wanted.
So, and back to the sort of Yellowstone thing. So, in terms of, we talked about the tourism thing in general and whatever. So, on the one hand, for you, great, huge numbers of people coming in. On the other hand, it's fair to say the U.S. national park system has struggled over the last couple of years because of volume of tourists. Do you see that going down? Do you see it going up? Do you see it exploding?
It's exploding, and in the before times, about 40% of the visitors to the parks were from overseas. We had none of those in 20 and 21, and we had record visitation in 21 that was probably 25% beyond what they had experienced, and that
pure domestic.
Yeah,
pure domestic. Nobody could come in.
I think that happened everywhere. That domestic people discovered their own backyard. Thought, oh, it's actually pretty nice here. I don't have to necessarily fly across the
right.
road. Yeah.
I can't. That's so sad.
Yeah.
I wish that they hadn't discovered. Well, not really, but it has made things here. But because of their budget cycle, because they're a big federal agency, they're planning out 20 years, and they've already made their 20-year plan. And for them to pivot on a dime is impossible. They're trying to make some allowances, but they have a system that everything has to go through, and so for them to catch up is going to take. Well, it's never going to happen. They're just going to keep moving toward it. I do not.
So at the moment, there's a gap basically between capacity, capability, and expectation.
Right.
I guess of.
And the way that I've dealt with it personally is, I do not do any programming or any workshops or even go into the parks on any holiday weekends, like Memorial Day or Labor Day, 4th of July. 4th of July week, I won't go into the park at all. It's just counterintuitive. It's impossible. West Yellowstone, where we just came out of, there was an hour and a half wait to get into the park today. It was about 3 or 4 hours on the 4th of July.
And today's Monday.
Monday.
Just a Monday.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's something we've experienced with the capacity, as you say. We booked accommodation back in February, March, I think, and it was fairly tight then. And you booked fairly recently and are staying.
I had
He's
to
in
call
a cabin down in the hills somewhere.
I had to call the cancellations line to find a place. I wanted to make sure that these guys were in fact going to come all the way out here, because we're in the middle of nowhere.
Our threats are real.
They are. You can take them at their word.
Yeah, and it's also not especially cheap to stay here as well. So
Prices worldwide, obviously, prices have in general gone up. Lots of people it's in the news. Lots of people are struggling with that. But actually, if you look, and from my experience, certainly in US travel over the last couple of years, if I look at a 2019 cost to a 2023 cost, it's probably 30-35% more, just at the base level.
Yeah.
So everything has just got more. The people here are more. There are more of them. Costs are higher, so actually I'm not sure the places are actually earning more. It's just a case of...
I think that they've increased their prices to maintain their margins.
Yeah. So everyone almost is struggling with it, but then you've got the added pressure cooker, as it were, of even more people in that same space, all battling for the best experience they can have.
Yeah. So don't complain to the people that are checking you out about the costs. They don't have any control over that. The price is just the price. It's something you just have to kind of get beyond.
Yeah. Well, cheers, Brian.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Brian, for joining us.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for coming out here. It's been fun.
No, it's been great. Thank you.
Bye.
And
Bye.
back to the studio. Hello again, and thanks for Brian for spending the time and chatting with us yesterday. With regards to Brian's link, I'll update the YouTube description once this is all wrapped up. So if anyone wants to follow Brian, go see him in Yosemite, Yellowstone.
It'll be in there in sort of 15 minutes
Yeah,
or so.
15, 20 minutes, something like that.
We're also now all duty bound to use the brand new phrase invented by Brian Creek, which is "in the before times," which refers to anything prior to 2020.
Yeah.
So we have a winner.
We have a winner.
Well done.
Yeah.
Apart from, so it is not 190 miles away from the ground. No. It's also not around 30 feet off the ground. That would be quite warm.
Yeah. And potentially dangerous. Yeah. So we were actually, and we've got a winner who is bang on. So we were pretty much hovering around the 2,500 mark.
2436.
Yeah, 2436 to be precise. So that was John Bost. So John, if you're still online, print is yours. If not, we go to the next nearest.
Well, I'm going to set. So there's an email address that is now in the comment on the live chat.
Yep.
So John, only John, send your details into David. Couple of things just on that video while we're waiting to make sure that John is alive, because otherwise it's going to go to someone else.
Yeah.
Number one, the reason that we were all doing hand signals to each other out there was because Brian has managed to choose the most mosquito-ridden location in the entire Yellowstone greater area.
Yeah.
Number two, this isn't from domestic abuse from David. This is a bow and arrow injury. Long story there. Anyway, so yeah, John is on. Right, well done, John. You win. There will be a print sent to you. We didn't find out where he lives. That could be costly. Anyway, there will be a print sent to you shortly, and that print will be of Grand Prismatic Spring. So for those of you that need to disappear, because it's been an hour, you are welcome if you wish. Those of you that want the extended version, we're going to edit through this one now. So we'll show you what David's done.
Yeah, exactly. And John, drop an email onto that address. Give me a few days to pick it up, and then we'll sort everything out from there. Nice. Cool. So this was, I think, probably one of the better shots. I mean, there's a lot. We didn't spend actually that much time over the spring because we're not allowed. No, the helicopter just can't sit there and slam on the side.
There's a flight path that has to be agreed with National Park Service, so you can't really abuse that when you're over there.
So it was pretty brief.
And just to be clear, that's not to be difficult to the people in the helicopter. It's actually, you imagine you're a guest in the national park. What you don't want, because if it's good for one helicopter company, it's good for 5, 6, 7, 8 and whatever. You just have 10 helicopters buzzing over the locations the whole time. So the idea is to keep it good for all.
Yeah, which is totally fair. I mean, obviously we would love to spend half an hour just circling it and everything, but it's about respect as well, isn't it? So first of all, I would crop in a bit tighter. As I said, I shot this one on the Sony a7R4, just purely for megapixels more than anything else. 24-70 lens, so I had some flexibility with being able to zoom in and out. As you can imagine, you can't exactly have 5 lenses on your lap. Switching them out in a helicopter with no doors on it, consequences disastrous, of course. Out of camera, it's pretty good. This one is actually a fairly low ISO. I noticed, I think it was Prasad or Deepak asking why I didn't use the native ISO. Sometimes I go a bit higher because there's really no difference in quality, to be honest.
It's
at
invariant
the pixel
on
level.
that camera,
I'm pretty sure the X-H2 is invariant. And also going to the lower under the base level ISO, I think 125, it has L next to it. I can't remember, or 100. It's not actually the base. The base ISO of that sensor. So if you do that, you need to be really careful with your exposure, because if you overexpose, you've got no highlight recovery.
And as you think about the 3 parts of that exposure triangle, to be clear and want to reiterate from earlier, shutter speed is king here. So if you don't have stabilization, and I mean proper big stabilization for a helicopter, if you don't have that, you need to be shooting at a ridiculously high shutter speed. So ISO is the one that we trade off. In return for a much higher shutter speed to catch something that's
rather have a bit of noise than blurriness,
blur,
really. So I was, as I said, probably a bit more paranoid. There was no point having f8 aperture or anything because we're at
miles away.
190
miles away from the Earth.
Yeah, 190 miles. So I stopped down 2 stops. I think f4. I think that's a 2.8
lens.
2.8 lens. So 1 stop then, just for a bit of quality. But it's actually it was fine quality wise. Anyway, sorry, that was somewhat of a digression.
Just compositionally, so there are many different pictures of Grand Prismatic. Some people choose to delete the boardwalk, so where people are walking.
Right.
Some people choose to empty the boardwalk, which you can also do. You can heal those people out. It'll take you a while, but you can heal them out. And some people choose to leave it in because it gives you scale.
Scale, exactly.
It's entirely up to you. Depends on what direction you want to go. There is no real right answer. You could shoot it with no people there if you got lucky on a day in the right time.
True.
But that's just personal choice.
Yeah, I think sense of scale is great because, to be honest, that could be exactly the same.
Tiny.
Could be tiny. Could be like the little pots that we saw earlier, which were this big across. This is, substantially bigger. So having the boardwalk gives a good sense of scale. Again, looking at the histogram, we can see that we've got no information in the highlights, very little in the shadows, so it doesn't make sense to leave levels as is. So again, if you're worried, you can just stick in the auto correction. I would probably
It does overdo it a little.
Over a little bit, so I would back that off ever so slightly because I don't want to completely crush anything that's going on here, especially if it's going to go to print. I might actually print this one for myself as well. And to be honest, that does actually a fair amount with the picture already. I would experiment carefully with clarity, like so. But as it's a natural object, I mean, we've seen quite a few of these pictures stuck up in lodges and hotel rooms and things, and sometimes it's a bit
awful.
Yeah, yeah, we know it's colourful, but be a bit sympathetic to nature. So if I'm
well,
really
bear in mind
interested,
as well, just remember you've also shot that with a polarizer on top of it, so
Yeah.
it's already been not enhanced is the wrong word, but it's already had its colours enriched.
Yeah.
So if you then start going again and again and again, you're just getting to a place of no reality.
Yeah. Little vignette, and to be honest, I don't know what you think.
Pretty
Paul,
good.
but I don't think I'd do a lot more than that. There's a couple of little sharp points here which are just light picking up off waves, for want of a better
It's where the polarizer cleaned up most of it, but there's always going to be a couple of little strays.
So I won't make you sit here and watch me do it, but I would probably pick off most of those, so it's just a more even hue on the top of the surface. I personally would leave the people in. There's nothing which is
you need
kind
to
of out of the ordinary.
Check the people.
Check
just
the people.
From the voice of experience, check that every person in there isn't doing anything they shouldn't do.
Everyone is dressed and so on and so forth. Sharpness-wise, I'd probably leave it at that as well. I think any more than that, it might start getting a little bit on the digital side. Color-wise, I think that was pretty
natural.
Good. So just because we've got a million sliders and everything, this is perhaps a good reason or a good example that you don't have to touch.
Don't mess with nature.
Don't mess with nature. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So, and on that, so bearing that in mind, do you want to go back to you had the previous edit, the sunrise?
Oh yeah,
which we said we'd return to.
Was that this one here? No.
No.
That was day 5.
No.
Day
7.
Day 6. Day 7. It's all
there we go.
This one. Let's see. So this was maybe less sympathetic to reality, I would suppose.
Well, you've shifted the tone of the image, so effectively it's become more daylight-like, with a more pronounced cloud. So the problem you have with the original RAW in this, and it's a fact that tones change the feel of an image completely. And during sunrise, you're going to get lots of different tones. You're going to get the pre-sunrise, where it's very, very cool sky, but then maybe some little red wisps in the cloud. Just before the sun peaks, you're going to get the pink overall. If you've got cloud in the sky, you're going to get the pink overall feel, which actually then it changes the sky to be pink, which some people love, some people don't. To try and place that on a wall can be difficult because not many people have pink sympathetic rooms, for example.
Yeah.
So it's about trying to choose which bits you want to keep, which bits you want to play with in terms of those tones. You could make that sky green if you wanted to. It's your choice, but try and keep it as close to what you saw at a preference rather than trying to shift it just for the sake of it. The risk with just editing this as it is, with all those pinks in there, is it's just going to get more and more pink.
Yeah.
If you were to pull up saturation on there a tiny bit on the background, you're going to see the whole thing just starts glowing with that really strong pink, and that's really difficult to look at as a picture. So what David's done on the previous edit is almost try to neutralize some of that.
Yeah.
And just use the pink and the yellow as the highlights on the cloud, not the overall sky.
I was trying to remember what I actually did.
So on here, I would change your setting on Magic Brush to be sample entire photo, because then you can go around the tree branches, for example.
Well, let's do that again. Clear mask. Right.
So remember Magic Brush without the entire photo ticked, which is the default, and you don't want it on all the time, trust me. But it's going to only go to an edge of something until it basically is stopped.
Yeah, but it's also going to pick up the water.
Yeah, it's going to pick up any. So if you enable it, it's going to pick up anything that it sees as similar to that, whether that's the sky or the water, and go around things like the tree branches, the leaves, because it can sample everything that's that tone. Yeah,
but now I don't really want the water though, do I?
So you just say a regular brush.
Brush. Yeah, that's true, because I don't need to be super accurate.
Yeah.
So we can just go comme ça.
And this is one, now David's erasing it, to bear in mind. If you're changing the sky, be careful that you're still sympathetic with its reflection.
Yeah.
I would still refine it.
Yeah.
Because
so if we look at the...
it'll still be quite binary.
Yeah.
That's the challenge.
So right-click, refine mask.
Zoom in maybe on the tree so they can see. So that's looking pretty binary.
Chunky,
it's either in or not. Whereas once you hit the refine button, you see it softens and it starts to be a little bit more careful around the edges.
Yeah. So if we go 0, pretty solid. 300, just takes the edge off it a little bit, because you are in danger of then looking a bit comedy postcard kind of thing. That it's very obvious that this has been treated differently.
Yeah.
So skywise,
there are a couple of questions in the comments we'll come back to after you've done this. They're about the
I can't
prismatic.
remember what I did with the sky.
I think there's a white balance change, maybe.
Possibly.
Or
I think
color
I pulled
editor,
the
maybe.
brightness down a bit. White balance. Yeah, maybe that. Or did I go warmer? Well, let's see. You can pick and choose what kind of look you're going for, really. Yeah, infinite possibilities.
And then you've got a separate layer. I think you can invert that layer to get the trees.
Yeah, exactly. So if I make a new layer, call that trees. Whoops. Trees. Copy the mask from the sky. And then right-click, invert. And then we've got the bottom, like so. And this, again, I played around for a bit longer, but I wanted to see a bit more into the tree line. So obviously, if we open up the shadows, you can see a lot that's going on. But it only needed to be...
just to see detail.
Just to see a little bit. Mostly, if we turn this off, it's just getting a little bit on the solid side. So opening up the trees, opening up the reflection a bit, just means we can see a bit more into it. I believe I did a color pick and screwed it up, I think, on the last one, and never got round to fixing it. Because on the color editor, advanced, not skin tone, I think I was trying to enhance
the yellows
around
and
here a
reds,
little bit,
and
but
it just went too high.
It was, it started, obviously. Yes.
Be careful with those highlights. So as David moves his mouse around the screen, if you hover over one of the yellow parts, whatever, you'll see that red channel at 255 at the top of the screen.
Look up here and look at the red channel.
So that's telling you that channel is clipped.
Gone.
There's no more data in there. So you can try. The first thing would be to try and pull it back to get it below the 255 and then edit from there. The second would be maybe use a different base characteristic. So you can use a linear response curve rather than the auto curve in that profile section at the very top of when you pull things in there. So you've got your auto curve as the default. If you're on Fuji, it's got the simulations, but linear response will soften some of that harshness of the highlights.
But then it's up to you to build that contrast back in.
Put it back in. So it's about choice.
Yeah, it doesn't take much to actually kill that highlight scene. Yeah, very quick. So that would be probably go back, turn on linear response, and just carefully build that in. But looking at keeping a subtle edit, bit warmer, see some detail in the trees, but not going completely ridiculous.
So question, J.A. Hall, how would you remove the high points on the water? And is linked actually. Brian is still asking you questions. He's got Brian, you've left. So could you use a single point noise reduction to get rid of those pixels?
I did try it actually.
No is the answer,
but
because it's
doesn't
not a
work.
single pixel. So the single pixel noise reduction is looking for literally a single pixel
of
either RGB. It will grab it. And this is the reason we say to people be careful with that on stars.
Yeah, because it will.
If you crank it up too much on a night sky, it will delete the stars.
Yeah.
It will get some of these, but you can see it's not actually removing them. It's just dumbing them down a little bit.
So that's just a case of patience and
a healing brush.
And a healing brush.
And a lot of healing brush.
I mean, it could be, you could try the dust and scratches filter in Photoshop maybe, but it might soften.
I don't think you're going to get there.
I think it's just
be thankful that Capture One no longer requires a different layer for every healing brush.
Yeah.
And you only have 16 layers, because you're going to be on about 300 points on there.
Yeah, exactly. So that's just sadly a laborious
and Ash asking if there's any chance of adding a Velvia 50 style or preset. Is there a chance? Yes.
Yeah, there is for Fuji film sims if you're on Fuji, but not general. But out of all the Fuji film sims, it's probably the one which I least like if you actually look at it, it does go a bit crazy.
Bit rich.
It's not bad. It's just a little bit on the rich side. Yeah, but Velvia was. I saw a question from Prasad, actually, manual mode with auto ISO would be suitable for the Grand Prismatic. I did consider that, but the little control freak inside me still wanted to manually set the ISO.
What you don't, the problem with cameras on auto ISO, sometimes, especially in the darker parts of a flight, they go extreme and they get out of control.
Yeah.
So there's an element of, if you are going to do that, if your camera allows for it, I would put the bracket in there that says you can go from this to that.
Yeah.
Otherwise, because the easiest thing for the camera is to put the ISO at 20,000.
Yeah. And to be honest, it's so fast manually to change the ISO without taking my eye off the viewfinder and using thumb wheel on the back to change it. I thought, you know what, I'd rather just have me in control of that.
We had very different camera experiences in that.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, you did well to get the shot with.
Yeah. So we have a phase one shot out of that scene, but wow, we had to work for that.
Yeah, exactly.
I.
Yeah. And that's about it. I think that again similar. Oh, that's actually adjusting without any layers. To be honest, that was a little sunrise shot through the valley.
What would happen if I thought that's great, but I want to back that off because you've done that all in the background?
If we wanted to do that, we can right click. Oh, no, not right click. We can say here, and no, it's not there either. It's here, isn't it? Move background adjustments to new layer. So now all of that gets shoved onto that layer, and my background is now clear. So that was added in 16.1. something. I don't remember fully, but it's actually a handy feature for when you do a quick lazy edit and it actually turns out all right.
Yeah.
And you think, I wish I'd done that on a layer because now I could spend a bit more time on it. It works well.
One more. So the advantage of being live is you get to control the direction of this little episode.
Yes.
Paul has pointed out that we said something about waterfalls earlier.
Oh, yeah.
So we will go back to the waterfalls for your benefit, Paul, personally.
We
might miss our flight.
Yeah.
But
well, you can do that, so because I forgot what you did.
It's just So it's a simple one. So basically, this is a shot that looks out over. Is it the lower? Is the Yellowstone Falls or upper? It's either upper or lower.
Lower.
Obviously,
I think
it's one of
was
them.
the lower.
Yeah. And it's the bigger one, I think, from what Brian was saying. This is a shot across that falls. It's got a 30-second exposure. Yep. The challenge with some of this on when you're at 30 seconds and so on, you've got lovely water movement up here. You've smoothed all this out. You've got down here the nice smoothing of the water here. So anything less than 30 seconds looks a bit scraggly. The problem with 30 seconds is you start to lose some of the definition in where the water is really flowing and really quite hot. So with no other change on this, I think you've got some edits, just pulling up the exposure, but with no other change, I'm just going to create a brand new layer and we'll call it Falls. And really, really rough, so I don't want the magic brush. The reason I don't want the magic brush is because I don't want all similar areas to this. I want to actually specify the area that I want. So a standard brush, relatively soft edge, full flow, because I don't want little bits of it, as it were. Sorry, I wanted to change size. And a little bit smaller size. And I'm going to press M to turn my mask on so I can see it. And I can be really rough here because it doesn't really matter about the edges down here, because what I'm going to do then is, as you saw earlier, one of the favorite tools, Refine Mask. And that's going to give us a really nice outline of that waterfall. If I want to be really picky, I can go in and erase some of this stuff at the edges, but actually it's so faint on the mask, it's not really going to have that much.
No, especially with the kind of adjustments you're going to put in as well.
So we've got that all masked, all nice. We can then do a couple of things. So number one, we can pump up some contrast. Number two, we can actually pull back highlights. So not too much so that the water goes grey. We're not going to punch it that way. We're going to pull back some highlights because I'm then going to flip that by pushing up clarity. So I'm protecting the highlights from the clarity tool. I want the clarity tool to lift up any midtones, all of the strands, but I don't want them to push any of the highlights out of our scope. You can be quite aggressive with clarity on here, and you can also play with structure as well. If you want to, it depends on the waterfall itself. You can play with dehaze a little bit, and it will give you some clarity. But what you can find is it ends up with a little bit muddy as well. If it does, but you like the fact there's less haze, then just use that contrast slider a touch more to pull it up. And you go from here, which is a little bit grey, a little bit flat, to there, where that white water is really popping and I've got the strands back in. It's personal taste, though. Some people will want that. Some people will want the more natural look of water flowing. But especially when you've got a longer exposure, you just want to be a little bit more punchy on that water, because it loses quite a lot of definition over that 30 seconds, especially when it's so powerful.
There was another one of them which I think, oops, wrong suggestion, showing library. Turn that filter off. Yeah, where it was, I didn't check if it was actually recoverable, where it was overcooked. Oh yeah,
it's all there.
But you see, that's...
But by recovering it, you lose the white, effectively. It goes into grey.
That's only a short exposure, 10 seconds. I don't know if that... Oh yeah, it could be pulled back. Yeah.
But then this is where clarity is your friend. So you're using highlight recovery to get access to all the texture in it, and then you're using clarity to punch it. If you don't use the highlight recovery first, clarity is going to make it go too far, and it's just going to be a bit too obnoxious on your eyes.
And there's a bison. There you go.
Yeah, bison just generally seem to want to be left alone.
Yeah, yeah.
I actually feel sorry for the bison that maim people, because it was probably just wanting
scared
to eat.
Yeah, I think it's quite a timid animal in a way. So
I say that now. Yeah. If one attacks me, I may not feel quite so sorry for him. Prismatic says, for a waterfall, 1/4 second is the magic number to start with. I wouldn't agree at all.
I think
depending on style. So the problem is, for the water itself, absolutely, you will get strands, especially on a fast-flowing waterfall. But if you're capturing the top and the bottom pools of the waterfall, you won't smooth them out in a 1/4 second, nowhere near. And actually, it can look really rough. If you want that to be smooth to the point where it looks quite silky,
glossy,
you're talking about a lot longer.
Because I'd argue 1 minute might be nicer at the top there, because it's a little bit
still got some
staccato, and down here is all right, but it's still a little, So yeah, I think for how this the feature runs, then 1/4 second would be not quite enough, I don't think.
But to want to go back, so Prasad's point, if you're capturing literally the waterfall, so imagine if you were at this sort of crop, 1/4 second, fine, because you're going to get that moving water. But it depends on the framing. For the wider frame, you might want some longer stuff for the.
So that's an 85th of a second, which is a weird exposure in itself. And that was 10 seconds. Yeah. Nice one. Well, I think that's it.
We'll leave you with Brian's final thought. Bison are constantly grumpy and on the edge of violent behaviour.
Right, maybe not timid and calm as we thought. Nice. So we'll leave you with a picture of Grand Prismatic Springs,
which John's getting. Cool. No one else is. Sorry.
Yep. Sorry, John. Or sorry, everyone else. So please do send me that email. For Brian's contact information, I'll update the YouTube description within the next 20 minutes or so. So that should sit there. This is our last live stream from the USA. We are going to the airport imminently and heading home. There are live streams coming up in August. I'm away for a couple of weeks. My colleague Alex is going to do one. So she'll be on, I think, early August, I believe. And then I've got 1 or 2 to do, something on black and white and something on... It escapes me, but it's yet to be put up online. But that's a job for Friday. So if you look around Friday, early next week, you should see some new stuff coming up on support.captureone.com. We'll also try and knock up some blog posts on a few subjects that we thought were useful to learn over this period. So that could be long exposure. It could be aerial as well. Cityscape do's and don'ts. So we'll knock out some content over the next month as well. But do come back and join us in August. I appreciate many of you will be taking a break as well, but if you can...
They're all coming to Yellowstone.
Yeah, exactly. If you can sneak away for a bit and watch a live stream, we'd much appreciate it. So thanks for joining us over these past however many days it was. It's all a blur. And we'll see you all in the future. So enjoy your weekend and take care. See you soon. Bye now.